sapientiam sanctorum manarem populi et laudes eorum nunciat ecclesiam nominatem meorum vivendim secundum seculi. Exultate Iusti Domino, rectos decet collaudatio. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sic ut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Sapientiam sanctorum laudeam populi et laudes eorum nunciat ecclesiam nominatem eorum vivendim secundum seculi. Vanity of vanities, the preacher cries. Now, the preacher is the way that we have that word Ecclesiastes coming into our languages. And to understand how it comes to the word preacher, we need to understand the meaning of Ecclesiastes. The es ending is the person, and what he does is ekkleo, he calls out, he is the caller out, and what he calls out is then the called out thing, the ecclesia, the church. The church is the called out thing, the assembly. And that is the way that it comes across the centuries via the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation way back from the original word, which would have been kohelet, which comes from kahal. Kahal is to call, precisely, in Hebrew, and the one who does it is put in the participial form, kohelet. He is the caller. And so the herald, the preacher then, that's how it comes through. And this mysterious person is calling across the centuries and in a way addressing questions which humankind has always posed itself, including the meaning of life. And there are some gems in this short book, one of which we have on this very day, so much so that it has actually gone into song. In Welsh we have a very beautiful song which is basically this passage put into verse. And we have one phrase on which I would like to dwell, because it is too rich otherwise to dwell upon in one morning. I have indeed in the past made of this passage a whole retreat in Italy. A time for this and that. Each thing has its own time and is correct at that time. Now, one which would be actually, strangely enough, linked with the Gospel we can take with us, it's this one. A time for keeping silent, a time for speaking. Why do I say that? Because, well, the Lord says here, when this declaration comes in answer to his question, who do people say I am and who do you say I am? The Christ of God, says Peter. But he gave them strict orders not to tell anyone about this. The time, of course, wasn't right. After the resurrection, it was right. And there are things which are wasted, indeed squandered, when said at the wrong time. We all know lots of things, And the immature person is unable to contain himself. He will say all that is in his head. He cannot contain a secret. The old expression was to hold one's counsel. It is important if we have friends, people who come to us, because if we are not a person of confidence, and that means a person that we can count on to hold our counsel, to keep it to ourselves, then we are leaks. We are people who divulge things which then become out of context and are given to people who do not possess them correctly. So it is important to know when to say something which is true, but which can be helpful only at its time. But there is one issue I would like to address specifically. It's this: the way in which, if one looks around, one sees that people are unable to know the difference between the time to listen and the time to speak. A time for keeping silent, a time for speaking. I am ever amazed at the small proportion of even pious souls who have this fault of talking. One engages sometimes by wanting to react and interact, and then one finds that they are not wanting really any interaction, but only an audience. They are not listening at all, but always preparing the next thing. Indeed, one finds that with some people it is such an illness and a disorder that they are quite deaf to the pain they are causing by ever making it impossible to stop a conversation. One sometimes has to do with people who will actually talk for several hours and without a stop, if one does not create a reason to make it not happen. And even that is difficult to do, because there is just not one pause. And this can be an illness going on until death, causing pain to many, and lack of increase in knowledge to the ones concerned, because if one is always giving out, there is very little new going in. A time for keeping silent, a time for speaking. In German there is an old saying: Reden ist Silber, Schweigen aber ist Gold. To speak is silver, to be silent is gold.